with the man himself, Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is he was Sputnik political analyst and co-host of the Critical Hour. He is now, I would imagine, a contributing analyst, and you have your own YouTube channel. Is it under your name, Garland?
Yes, it is.
Yep. Excellent. So definitely check out Garland Nixon. I saw you yesterday, I believe. I think you were interviewing Ritter, or it was another military guy. So, man, how you doing today? You doing all right?
Doing wonderful.
All right, let's do the news. I have a pet peeve that I want to start off with. So, Crystal Ball, and I did this show yesterday because it annoyed me so much. I was in bed at literally got up at 1 a.m. to talk about it because it bothered me that much. So Crystal Ball was having a conversation with Cenk Uygur. I imagine you know these people. Uygur was the one that ran Young Turks. Crystal Ball at one point used to be on MSNBC. She eventually transferred over to her own show to Rising, and then she eventually got her own show. All right. She comes on and she says this about Tim Pool, where she effectively attacks Tim Pool. Now, I'm not a fan of Tim Pool, but I feel like I am defending myself in defending Pool on this because I find it to be egregious, especially for a lefty. This is Crystal Ball. Listen to what she says here when she goes after Tim
Pool. The mainstream press.
I totally disagree with you. So the mainstream media guys are the worst liars in the world. They lie way worse than even right-wing media.
I don't know about
that. Okay, we can have that discussion. I think you cannot find two bigger liars in America than Joe Scarborough and Whoopi Goldberg.
I mean, but I hear you. But I also have been kind of blackpilled on a lot of independent media because that tenant media situation where, Tim Pool and whoever else were taking random sketchy money to put out whatever propaganda they were told to put out. I just, I don't.
Okay, that didn't happen that way. Yes, Tim Pool was working with that tenant media company, whatever they were called. The Russians put in $20 million. Again, stupid, waste of money. Fair enough. But they didn't know that. Meaning Tim Pool's content and their content, even though they're right-wingers, I don't like their points of view, all that's fine. But it was their point of view, and it was a point of view espoused by plenty of Americans. They were out there, and she's making they were just pumping propaganda from the Russians, which is the veiled talking point that she's effectively using here. And she goes after them, as I point out, they didn't know. And it's a bit rich that she's doing this, considering she was on MSNBC and was a shameless propagandist for the Democratic Party. Admittedly so, because I can play you the clip where she pointed out how her speech was being corralled, where she had a monitor, where she self-censored as a result of the pressure that they were putting on her. And it's like, okay, well, you're self-censoring for who? For a network that is an appendage of the U.S. government. You're effectively functioning as state media when a Democrat is in office. Am I being too belligerent in this? It annoyed me deeply, and I get it. I'm defending myself on this because I feel like attacks like that are also the same attacks that can be levied at me for my service at Sputnik, something that I am deeply honored by, meaning I love that job. And I was proud to do that job because I felt like I had the ability to be honest. I can give my take. Give me your take on this. Am I overplaying this? Am I investing too much into this?
I think you hit on something important here. This is an important discussion, particularly in these times, because what we see is the mainstream media. And, the mainstream media is clear and obvious because they have certain guardrails. They have to say certain things about Hamas and certain things about Israel and certain things about Ukraine. And we know there's certain things they have to say, certain positions they have to take. Okay. Then there's what we call the alternative media, and that may be me or you or the Duran or maybe Jimmy Dore, whoever there's some conservatives. There are people who are out there saying things that they think and believe that would be, poo-pooed by the mainstream media as evil Russian propaganda or pro-terrorist or whatever, right? Okay. So you've got an alternative media and you've got a mainstream media. But then you got the crystal balls, in my opinion, and the whatever you pronounce, Chunky, Sink Uger, whatever, okay, who seem to me that they want to kind of, you know, the old saying, they want to run to second base and keep one foot on first.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They want to be seen as the alternative media. But at the same time, they don't want to step too far out or over the line and say things that are so completely unacceptable in the mainstream media that they won't ever have a hope of coming back in there, of being part of that system. You know what I mean? Like they're holding out hope that maybe Crystal Ball and Sink seem like they're holding out hope that maybe the mainstream media will feel so bad that it'll reach back out and grab them and pull them back in and say, you guys come back to MSNBC and CNN and you can be, and so that they can, so you know what I mean? Like they're trying to be viewed as alternative media, but they don't want to go straight too far from the mainstream media,
Right.
because hopefully
Right.
one day they can get back there. Right.
Right.
And so it's the alternative media who are like, screw the mainstream media. We make our statement is we're going to say what we want. We don't care what you like it. And we believe it to be true. We'll say it. And if
Right.
we change our mind about something and say, you know, I really thought that, but now I
Then we
found
do so.
something different. So I've taken another position. Right.
Yeah.
That we're going to be what we're going to be.
It's
And we're
called
going to
being
say what we
honest.
think, but
Yeah.
we're not trying to get back in there. And that's what I think. I think when you hear a discussion between two people like that, there's their discussion, but Crystal Ball still has to play the Russiagate game. You know what I mean? She can't stray too far. She can't say, well, that Russiagate crap was all lies. Because you'll never get back in the mainstream media if you say that. So she still has to play the Tim Pool or whoever is a Russian bot. She can't get into the details of that. Well, he didn't know, so he wasn't. And I believe I still don't trust that story.
Yeah.
Because every story I've ever seen about Russiagate was a fraud. Right.
Well,
every single time was a fraud when you dig down inside of it. And I think that if you dig down into that story and they say the Russians gave $20 million, I have to ask, did it come from the Russian government? Did it come from a Russian media company that thought maybe they could get into Western media and make money? Who specifically, where did that money come from? Because in the past, we'd hear the Russians ran a social media operation, and we find out that it was a Russian company, and that that was 6% of what they did. That they were just another clickbait company, but they were able to say the Russians and imply that it was the Russian government, that it wasn't. Yeah. So again, you get my point. There's a lot of bullcrap going on here, and I don't trust those kinds of people because they're trying to still be part of this mainstream media that they're allegedly attacking or pushing themselves away from.
No, I perfectly accept that. And you're right. Those like internet research organization, internet research something. It was a private company that was a profit-making company that was following the flow of the election, putting out like buff Jesus things. I mean, half of the things took place after the election, and they acted like this was somehow comparative to Hillary Clinton $1 billion campaign. Like, it's just outlandish. So I agree with you. I guess my feeling on this is that even if they did, meaning even if it was a situation where they put in $20 million and wasted $20 million, they didn't know. Like it was like they didn't know. And it's like, I feel like going after him for this is A, a throwaway, but B, on some level, is an indictment of us for something that we didn't do. It's like
I went out. It's completely a lie. She's being dishonest.
I went out, we did our job, and our job was to be honest. And as I pointed out, the federal government has gotten so fundamentally dishonest that just being honest impugns and goes after him. I don't know. It just bugged the hell out of me.
I'm with you, but Crystal Ball was this, and she was playing that game dishonest. It was, yes, they were paid to do this. Whoa. Paid to do this implies exactly what you said.
Yes.
They were paid and they were told to say certain things. If I find out that,
and by the way, Crystal Ball was. On Ed Schultz was very clear that MSNBC was telling people what they should say. And Crystal Ball herself came out and said she did a video on Hillary Clinton, and they called her in and put a monitor on her for videos on Hillary Clinton, and that she self-censored. She said, I wanted to be a truth teller, but hey, I'm a person. Okay, so, how are you hitting that guy for something that you yourself is guilty of?
Here's my question. When she's online, if somebody gives them a super chat, if somebody is Patreon for them or not, do they research to see where it came from? What happens if you find out that one of their Patreon people or somebody that sent them a super chat for $100? What if you find out that they're Russian? Well, you didn't know they were Russian. You accepted the super chat. Can I now say, well, Crystal Ball's paid? The Russians are telling her what to do, when in fact she didn't know who sent her that super chat. So if you get donations or anything else from someone and you don't even know they're giving you the money, it is extremely dishonest to imply that there's some kind of a relationship between you and that person.
Right there.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
And she knows it. She knows it.
I don't know. It's just aggravating to me. Just deeply aggravating to me. A sore spot, I suppose. I want to play another thing. So among people who don't know that they're lying, or that they should know that they're lying, I am fascinated by Democrats' defense of Joe Biden pardoning Hunter Biden. So let's start with that first. Give me your take on Joe Biden doing this. I knew he was lying. I don't know why anybody else thought he was telling the truth on this. It's his kid. He's certainly not going to let his kid go to jail when he has nothing to lose. But give me your take on Joe Biden doing this.
I'll put it like this. I'm with you. If he'd have just said, well, he's been found guilty of this and I'm going to pardon him of that. Okay, yeah, look, it's your son and I understand. And we know your son's a crackhead. And, even though we all know it's wrong for you to do that, you got the power to do it. And you're in D.C. and nobody's going to be shocked that you pardoned your son. Okay, there's all the hypocrisy. But here's what's interesting. The nature of his pardon. Going all the way back to January 1st of 2014, the indictment is not that he pardoned his son. The indictment is that he pardoned his son back to a date. Now, what were we told? Hunter didn't do anything wrong in Ukraine. Joe Biden wasn't the big guy getting 10%. That was somebody else clearly that Hunter was referring to, right? He pardoned himself. And what he did was he just really told everybody right out in the open, yes, all those accusations that were made about my son and I in Ukraine were true, because and the overthrow of Ukraine, all of those things were true because I had to go back 10 years just to the very date, a month before we overthrew the government of Ukraine. That's the date we're going to start.
All right.
He pardoned himself.
10 years. Oh, that's a good point.
He pardoned himself.
Oh, that's such a good point. Your point is, this is not entirely about Hunter. This has to do with the way, because influence peddling, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is more sophisticated than this kind of cartoonish, I'm writing you a letter to bribe you for so and so. If Hunter Biden has dinner with his business associates, which he did, and Joe Biden is sitting there as VP, okay, well, that's called heft. And that shows on some level that whatever Hunter Biden was telling people, that the president or the VP is there, he can deliver it. And so Joe Biden's name and persona was being leveraged for these business deals. When he's like, I'm sitting here with my father, and if you don't give me $20 million, all of the people that my father know are going to be mad at you. Okay, well, Hunter Biden doesn't have that clout. Nobody gives a damn about Hunter Biden being mad at him. They may care if they're a businessman about Joe Biden being mad at him, which immediately fuses this idea of government and private interests that Joe Biden is saying didn't fundamentally exist. Give me a take on that.
Well, yes. And here's the thing about it. There was this guy, I forgot his name, but there was and you can go online and read it. This like investigative intake document from the FBI, where this guy came forward. You probably remember it. And he said, Joe Biden bribed us and we gave millions to Hunter and Joe. And he said, and we've got tapes and we've got other things, if you remember that. And after he did that, the FBI arrested the guy.
Yeah.
The FBI arrested the guy
Yeah.
and locked up and charged the guy who said, I got evidence that Joe Biden's a criminal. Oh, you do, huh? Yeah, well, there we go. We grabbed you and we were going to put you away, pal. You're going to jail. Okay, so my point is, so it's clear there's evidence out there, or Joe Biden is horrified that there's evidence out there that he was
Laptop
involved
from
in
hell.
criminal activity. However, the way to get to it would be to go through Hunter, arrest Hunter, and then say, okay, Hunter, you got to tell us all these things. And then they may be able to bring Joe in and ask him and other family members and other people. So now Hunter won't be investigated. Hunter won't be looked into. Hunter won't have to answer questions, all this kind of stuff. And so he really pardoned his family influence operation. But back to 2014, 10 years. Oh, by the way, nobody's against the law. I mean, nobody's above the law. Nobody's above the law. Remember that? You know, it so discredits every moral position that the Democrats have taken against Donald Trump. Every moral position. Remember this? Donald Trump's a liar and a criminal. And Joe Biden's a decent guy.
Yep.
He's a decent
We
guy.
believe in the law.
We believe, yes, we said the rule of law, all this moral, self-righteous, pious posturing that they've been doing. Joe Biden exposed it all just like that. When Donald Trump comes in, he's got a free hand. If I'm Donald Trump, the January 6th, everybody that I could possibly think of, I would pardon everybody for everything. Why wouldn't he? What are the Democrats going to say? We believe in the rule of law. Nobody's around. That dog ain't hunting no more. Boy, you talk about a free hand for Donald Trump to pardon anyone, anything he wants to do, he can do. And now what can they say? Well, Donald Trump, now the Supreme Court ruled that he can't be held accountable. All that crap is gone. They exposed. Good. Thank you, Joe Biden. You exposed the reality of the hypocrisy and the absurdity of the Democratic moral posturing.
And it's a weird thing that both political parties are now impugning the justice system. Both of them are saying that the justice system is a fraud, that they're politically motivated. Like, that's the Joe Biden. I get it, right? It's a dad that pardoned his kid. But they have to admit that this was deeply cynical for the exact reason that you mentioned. Like, Joe Biden was like, well, my son, I'm proud of him. I'm going to follow the justice system. I'm not going to get involved. I have clip after clip after clip of Joe Biden's like, I'm not going to pardon my son. Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, who's historic, according to her, 8 minutes of her saying, Joe Biden is not going to pardon his son. Joe Biden is not going to pardon his son. Clips, oceans of videos of these people on CNN and the other media. Joe Biden is not going to pardon his son. He's such a great man for not doing that. It's cynical. And then I want to get your take on the responses. Like, Whoopi Goldberg came out and was like, well, I don't consider it a lie. It's like, okay, that's outrageous. And why don't you consider it a lie? Because he's on crack. And, Trump wasn't on crack. And so Trump committed crimes. So this is worse. And it's like, Whoopi, that is not a defense for it being a lie. Whoopi Goldberg is out crazied by this goofball on CNN. I want you to listen to what she says here, because it's pretty astonishing. Because in the process of arguing that Joe Biden wasn't lying, she flagrantly lies. Let's play this clip.
A lie, because honestly, what the other side has been saying for years, what you guys ran on for president, was multiple lies. I mean, if Eric Holder said it right, I think he said if Hunter's name was Joe Smith, this case would probably have never even gone to trial, right? That it was always a political witch hunt, and it was always.
But wasn't, to Scott's point, I mean, wasn't it a lie? I mean, you can defend it, but wasn't it a lie that he was not going to pardon him?
No, I believe the circumstances have changed. I think that we have a president coming into office who's talking about firing squads, who's talking about running people around the country and making sure that everyone who's his enemy is going to be punished. And Hunter Biden lied about his drug use on a government forum when he was buying a gun, and he failed.
That is outrageous. She said, I don't think it's a lie because circumstances have changed, and that the new administration wants firing squads. Now, the firing squads thing goes back to the Liz Cheney thing where Donald Trump was trying to argue anti-war position, saying, I'm sick of these wars. We spent $10 trillion. We didn't get anything for the $10 trillion that we spent. These wars need to stop. If Liz Cheney had to go out there and fight, if you put a gun in her hand and fighting these other people, if her life was in danger, she would think differently. Now, they took an anti-war conversation and flipped it to Donald Trump wants to shoot Liz Cheney in the face with the firing squad. Give me a take, Garland.
A couple of things. Realistically, and listening to the babble, the mindless prattle that was coming out of her, it doesn't matter what she was saying. You know what I mean? It wasn't a matter of what, it was a matter of who. Joe Biden or a Democrat said it, so it wasn't wrong. If a Republican said it, it would be wrong. That's number one. I think number two, and I don't see Jamaro, but hopefully he'll be back soon. Yikes. Oh, there you go. You were going for a second.
I give you a solo.
Oh, okay, good. Oh, okay, good. So the bottom line is this. She's just an apparatchik for the party. So I understand her job is to come on and say the Republicans are bad, Trump, Trumpity Trump, and therefore it doesn't matter. But again, it misses the point. Okay, here's what I would say. Number one, I have issues with the charges against Trump. I mean, against
Hunter. Yeah,
Hunter in the first place, because to me, there's a Fifth Amendment issue there when the government says, I want you to fill out this form and say whether or not you've done something that's a crime. Which using illegal drugs and possessing illegal drugs is a crime. So you've got to fill out this form. And on this form, you've got to say, I committed a crime. Or you can be charged for not admitting. So in my opinion, just from a legal perspective, I got issues with that form where the government can say, you got to write down, I committed a crime or not.
I see. Fifth Amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that being said, so if someone said, look, Garland, would you pardon Hunter or anyone else who was charged with that? I'd say anybody who was charged with that crime, you put me in charge. Yes, I'd pardon them, simply because I have a constitutional issue with the government saying I got to fill out a form. And on it, I have to say I committed a crime, Fifth Amendment violation. Okay. But that ain't what he pardoned them for. He pardoned them for anything going back to January 1st, 2014. So if I'm on there with her, I'm saying, well, we can agree. He shouldn't have pardoned him for that. I mean, it was fine. I would have said I would have pardoned him for it. But explain this to me. Donald Trump was impeached. He called Zelensky and said, I think Joe Biden's up to no good in Ukraine and it needs to be investigated. And he was impeached, wasn't he? How dare he imply that Joe Biden and Hunter may have done something illegal in Ukraine? But now Joe Biden comes along and says anything that Hunter might have done in Ukraine, he can't be charged for. It's starting to look like perhaps they shouldn't have impeached Donald Trump for that. Like maybe Donald Trump's allegations had some meat to them. So forget that. Get back to Hunter Biden has been pardoned for anything he may have done in Ukraine when Donald Trump was impeached for implying that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden might have done something in Ukraine. It keeps going back to you know what? They're happy to talk about that. They're happy to talk about, well, he was an addict. Fair enough. And so he wasn't responsible. Okay. Well, he was charged with this and maybe he shouldn't have been. We can have that discussion. But why did you go all the way back? 10 years.
Right.
Every crime for 10 years.
Right.
Anything. He could have murdered people,
right?
Thrown people out of windows, child prostitution, which wouldn't shock me. But all these things, all the way back to mysteriously the start of this whole Ukraine conflict. I wonder why he chose that date.
Oh,
they can't have that discussion on mainstream media.
10 years of criminality. And to back your point up, do you remember when those whistleblowers went to Congress? Ziegler and I think the other guys.
Bobby Alinsky? Remember, Bobby Alinsky was one of the whistleblowers.
Bobby Alinsky. I remember him too.
Yeah.
And what
there was a number of them.
Yeah. And what they pointed out was we tried to investigate Hunter Biden. We were not allowed. And when we were looking at stuff like the big guy, they was like, we weren't allowed. We were prevented from looking into it, and even looking into anything that might have led into Joe Biden, we were stopped. That was the only reason Weiss bought that case, because that case had been languishing for 5 years. They were effectively trying to let that case, let the time run out. And when those whistleblowers start talking to Congress, Weiss immediately got to action. It's like, oh, we got to bring this up. We got to bring this up. Yeah, they wouldn't allow it. You're right. 10 years. They wouldn't allow it. Just astonishing. I want to go to another thing that's taking place. So we have, well, it's not we, but there are protests that are taking place where they're trying to overthrow, have another Maidan in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And in having this attempted Maidan in Georgia, the prime minister said, I am not allowing this to happen. There will not be a Maidan 2.0. The president, who is expected or suspected to be a French agent, because she was French, she has dual citizenship, and is part of the EU, has refused to resign, or refused to leave on the date that she's supposed to leave, and is instead taking the pro-EU position, saying, I don't believe that the government was elected legitimately. I believe the Russians were involved. When they asked her for proof, she said, well, I don't really have proof. It's just the feeling that I have. If America can't find proof, well, certainly you can't expect me to find proof. I just feel it. And she has been leading these kind of oppositional protests to try to collapse the government. Europe doing the exact same thing that it did with Ukraine when it overthrew that government in 2014, the democratically elected government of Yanukovych. They come out and say, well, these protesters are loving light and they're carrying lilies everywhere they walk. And the vicious government is attacking them and beating them. And they're holding their lilies as they're being beaten in the face by cops. This is horrible. This is effectively the playbook for the Maidan. These people have been using bazookas. They've been shooting stuff, set Parliament on fire. I mean, I got video of this. And you get the US and the EU fully in line with trying to overthrow Georgia. One of the guys, Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary General, he comes out and gives a speech, and he says this. And listen to what he's saying here. He's conflating democracy with Europe as they try to overthrow the Georgian government.
Really urge the moment is that all allies are making clear that any actions that undermine the democracy in Georgia, or to take democracy further, also on its road to more EU and NATO integration, Euro-Atlantic integration, so to say, that they really urge the Georgian government to stay on the path they decided a couple of years ago.
Okay, for one, that's horrible English. That's a horrible English. Two, if you notice, he said, stay on the path to integration. Anything that is trying to pull you away from NATO or the EU, and he is conflating that with democracy, while simultaneously having protests after protests where NGOs are giving out money and food in order to show up, in order to protest the government, trying to literally overthrow the democratic will of the public, because 56% or 54% of the people voted for the Georgia Dream Party. That is a Eurosceptic party, and that's a party that didn't necessarily want to be all that belligerent to Russia. He is arguing, well, we need to get you into NATO and the European Union. And they put off a vote, just like the Ukraine at the time put off a vote of like a deal with the European Union as opposed to Russia, because Russia had the better deal. They pause. You get this conversation between Pyatt and Victoria Nuland overthrowing the government and putting the people in those positions. And I guess my point is, it is a bit rich. That's his speech while trying to break the government and the public will. Give me your take on this. I mean, do you think they're going to be successful with this Maidan 2.0?
No, a couple of things. Number one, and that is Georgia Dream won with 56%. In, at the same time that the U.S. empire was investing, millions of dollars and propaganda everywhere. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they got like 20,000 NGOs in a country of like 6 million people, like one NGO for every 200 or 300 people. That's really something, every 200, 300 people get their own NGO, which shows this has nothing to do with Georgia. This is a gigantic investment so they can open a new front, surrounding Russia with bases, blah, blah, blah. But if you think about that, if they got 56% with a probably multi-billion-dollar investment, if in fact there wasn't that investment, they'd probably got 80%, right? So they have already won, and the old regime change machine ain't what it used to be. People are wise to it. So now that they're like, okay, we got to do the street protest, the color revolution, maybe some violence. However, the Georgian government already knows the game. So the Georgian government's, okay, they're going to do this first. Let's be ready for that. Now, the violence is coming. There could be snipers. So if you know all of the games that they're going to play, the Georgian government, A, can prepare for it. B, they have the will of the people behind them. So I don't think they're going to be successful because the Georgian government has the will of the people behind them. They won outright, and they know the game they're going to play. And all they have to do is say, we're going to let this thing burn out. They've seen it. They thought, how about Iran? When there was this whole head scarf and some woman, of all things, the United States saying some woman died in the custody of the police. The U.S. is concerned with somebody dying in the custody of police, right? So they did this, and they did some violence and terrorism, and the Iranians just let it play out because they knew this thing's going to burn itself out. And I think what countries have learned about these protests, particularly in the cold, they can only go on but so long.
That's right.
And these people will be tired of being in the streets, and after a while, it'll start to dissipate. So I think what Georgia's going to do is what Iran did, and they're going to say, you know what? We'll push back as much as we need to push back, and we'll win by attrition. As they say, you got the watches, we got the time. If we let you keep protesting and screaming and crying and making noise and saying we need to go with war with Russia, sooner or later, you'll get tired before the government will get tired because we're the government. And this French woman who's the alleged prime minister, she was acting the ambassador from France to Georgia. And she denounced her French citizenship or ambassador so she could now, it's so obvious what they were doing.
They think she's a spy. That's like an intel person.
Yeah, but so I think they not. I think this game doesn't work because everybody knows the machinations of the game now, and they can just let it play itself out.
Garland, man, I always enjoy talking to you. I swear I do. Thank you for this. Garland Nixon. Definitely check out Garland Nixon on the Garland Nixon Show. He's an analyst, correspondent, and one of my favorite people, especially favorite people to bring on the show. Thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it, Garland.
Keep up the good work, and glad to see you back. You put out a lot of really good, you put out a lot of great stuff, and I watch all of your stuff. You have good guests, you put out great stuff, you cover everything. Man. So I do watch, but pretty much everything you put out, when it pops up, I turn it on. The only thing I watch is YouTube, unless I'm watching a game or something. I'm going to be watching YouTube. So, but yeah, I watch all your stuff, and keep up the good work. I'm sure you're going to continue to grow and be a big part of the online community.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate this. I appreciate that. I really do. Coming from you, I definitely appreciate it. You have a good one, okay?
All right. Thanks a lot. You too.
All right.